The discovery was supposed to be routine. Deep beneath a remote desert plateau, a team of paleogenetic researchers had been carefully extracting what they believed to be an unusually well-preserved fossil massive vertebrae, curved like arches and fragments of bone that suggested a creature far larger than any known prehistoric predator. Dr. Adrian Cole, a human geneticist known more for his skepticism than imagination, stood over the excavation site with a tablet in hand, reviewing scans with a furrowed brow. "It doesn't make sense," he muttered, zooming in on the cellular structure. "This isn't just fossilized. There's organic residue, intact." His colleague, Dr. Lila Moreno, glanced over his shoulder, her eyes widening. "That's impossible. DNA doesn't survive like that, not for millions of years." And yet it had. The fossil, dubbed specimen DRX-01, was unlike anything they had ever encountered. Its skeletal structure bore faint similarities to large reptiles, but with anomalies that defied classification, joint formations that implied powered flight, reinforced rib structures that suggested internal heat regulation, and cranial ridges that hinted at something more than mere instinct. But it was the DNA that changed everything. Extracted under sterile conditions and analyzed repeatedly to eliminate contamination, the genetic sequence revealed patterns that no known species possessed. It was complex, layered, almost engineered. Adrian stared at the screen late into the night, running comparisons against every database available. Nothing matched, not even close. What if it's not from Earth? Lila suggested one evening, only half joking. Adrian shook his head immediately. "No, there's too much compatibility, shared markers, evolutionary echoes. This thing, whatever it was, it belongs here. Or it did." But even as he said it, doubt crept into his voice. Because buried within the genome were sequences that shouldn't exist. Adaptive coding capable of rapid mutation, thermal resistance far beyond biological norms, and neural complexity that rivaled higher mammals. It was as if evolution had skipped steps, or been guided. Funding agencies quickly caught wind of the discovery, and within weeks, the excavation site transformed into a high-security research facility. Military presence arrived under the pretense of site protection. Though everyone knew the truth, whatever DRX-01 was, it had implications far beyond science. Adrian resented the intrusion but couldn't deny the importance of the find. If the DNA could be decoded, understood, it could revolutionize medicine, energy, even human evolution itself. But something about it unsettled him. The deeper he looked, the more it felt less like a relic and more like a message. Late one night, unable to sleep, Adrian returned to the lab. The fossil lay encased in reinforced glass, illuminated by soft blue lights. He approached it slowly, his footsteps echoing in the empty chamber. "What are you?" he whispered, almost expecting an answer. His gaze fell on a fragment of bone near the skull, smooth, almost polished, with faint grooves etched along its surface. Not natural grooves, patterns, symbols. His heart rate quickened. "Lila," he called over the comms. "You need to see this." Within hours, the team confirmed it. The markings were deliberate, structured language or something very close to it. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just an unknown species. It was intelligent, possibly even sentient. Adrian felt the ground shift beneath everything he thought he knew. "We're not studying an animal," he said quietly. "We're studying a civilization, or what's left of one." The breakthrough came unexpectedly. While attempting to reconstruct fragmented DNA strands, Adrian initiated a predictive sequencing algorithm, one designed to fill in missing genetic gaps using probabilistic modeling. It was experimental, risky, and not entirely approved. But curiosity overrode caution. As the system processed the data, something unusual happened. The algorithm didn't just fill gaps. It stabilized the entire sequence, correcting inconsistencies and aligning the genome into a coherent structure. The screen flickered, then displayed a complete strand. "Perfect. Too perfect." "Adrian, what did you just do?" Lila asked, staring at the results. He didn't answer immediately, because at that exact moment, every monitor in the lab dimmed slightly, as if responding to a surge of unseen energy. The fossil, silent and unmoving for millennia, emitted a faint, almost imperceptible glow from within its core. Adrian stepped back instinctively. That's not possible. Then came the signal. At first, it was just static, a low hum across the lab's communication systems. But within seconds, it began to organize itself, forming patterns, pulses, rhythms. The machines weren't malfunctioning. They were responding. The DNA sequence they had reconstructed wasn't passive data. It was active, alive in a way that defied every law of biology. The signal grew stronger, synchronizing with the lab systems, overriding firewalls and protocols with ease. "Shut it down!" someone shouted. But it was too late. Adrian watched, frozen, as the central display shifted from genetic code to something else entirely. A stream of symbols that matched the engravings on the fossil. The translation software struggled, then adapted, slowly converting the data into something readable. Words began to form, broken at first, then clearer. "Genetic lock. Released." A chill ran down Adrian's spine. "This isn't just DNA," he whispered. "It's a key." The room trembled slightly, not from any physical force, but from something deeper, an energy that seemed to resonate through the very structure of the fossil. Cracks of light spread across its surface, faint but growing. The team backed away, fear replacing curiosity. "We need to evacuate," Lila said urgently, but Adrian couldn't move. He was staring at the screen, where new words were forming, faster now. Species. Human. Compatible. His breath caught. What? Initiating reconnection. The fossil pulsed once, twice, then went still. Silence filled the lab, heavy and absolute. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Adrian felt it. A pressure in his mind, subtle but undeniable, like a distant voice trying to reach him. Not sound. Not language. Something deeper. Instinctive. Ancient. He staggered slightly, gripping the edge of the console. "Do you feel that?" he asked, voice strained. Lila shook her head, eyes wide. "Feel what?" But Adrian already knew the answer. Whatever had been locked inside that fossil had just found him. And it wasn't dead. Dragon. Adrian didn't sleep that night. Not because he couldn't, but because something inside him refused to let him. The moment he closed his eyes, he saw flashes. Vast skies painted in burning gold, towering shapes cutting through clouds, and a sensation of heat that wasn't painful but powerful, like standing at the heart of a living furnace. He jolted awake each time, breath uneven, heart racing, unsure whether he had dreamed or remembered something that wasn't his. By morning, the lab had been placed under full lockdown. Military personnel guarded every entrance, and the fossil, once a silent relic, now rested inside a reinforced containment field, faintly pulsing at irregular intervals. Lila stood by the observation glass, arms crossed tightly. "You need to tell me exactly what you felt," she said as Adrian approached, his face pale but focused. He hesitated before answering, struggling to find words that wouldn't make him sound irrational. "It wasn't just a signal," he said finally. "It was contact, like something recognized me." The data supported his claim in ways that only made the situation more unsettling. Since the activation of the reconstructed DNA sequence, the fossil had begun emitting low-frequency waves, patterns too structured to be random, yet too complex to decode fully. More disturbingly, biometric readings taken from Adrian showed anomalies, elevated neural activity in regions associated with memory and sensory integration, as well as a slight increase in body temperature that no one could explain. "You've been exposed," one of the military scientists stated bluntly. "We don't know how this organism interacts with human biology. You could be infected." Adrian shook his head, though doubt flickered behind his eyes. "No, this isn't an infection. It's synchronization." The word slipped out before he could stop it, and the room fell silent. Over the next several hours, the changes became harder to ignore. Adrian's senses sharpened subtly. He could hear distant conversations through thick walls, detect faint vibrations in the floor before anyone else noticed them, and even perceive temperature shifts in the air with uncanny precision. At first, he tried to rationalize it as stress or heightened awareness, but the evidence mounted quickly. When a technician accidentally dropped a metal instrument across the lab, Adrian reacted instantly, catching it midair before anyone else had even registered the movement. He stared at his own hand in disbelief. "That's not normal," Lila said quietly. "No," Adrian replied, his voice low. "It's not." Meanwhile, the fossil continued to change. The cracks of light that had first appeared now pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. Scans revealed that the internal structure was no longer inert. Something within was reorganizing, molecular bonds shifting in ways that defied conventional physics. "It's rebuilding," Lila whispered as she reviewed the latest imaging results. "But from what? There's no external input." Adrian stepped closer to the glass, drawn by an instinct he couldn't explain. "There is," he said softly. "Us." The connection intensified that evening. Without warning, Adrian collapsed to one knee, gripping his head as a surge of images flooded his mind. Clearer this time, more coherent. He saw a world unlike Earth, yet eerily similar. Vast mountain ranges carved by fire, oceans that shimmered with unnatural light, and creatures, dragons, so immense and majestic that they seemed like living forces of nature. He felt their presence, their thoughts, their unity. They weren't animals. They were something far beyond that, an ancient, intelligent species bound together by a shared consciousness. And at the center of it all was a single realization that echoed through his mind like a thunderclap. They had not gone extinct. They had gone dormant. Adrian gasped as the vision ended, his body trembling. Lila rushed to his side. "Adrian, what's happening to you?" He looked up at her, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. "They're not fossils," he said hoarsely. "They're seeds, dormant systems waiting for activation. And the DNA, it's not just genetic material. It's a network, a blueprint for reactivation." Lila stared at him, struggling to process the implications. "You're saying this thing is alive?" Adrian shook his head slowly. "Not alive in the way we understand. It's waiting for the right conditions, the right host." Before she could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Red lights flashed as containment protocols began to fail. "Energy spike in Sector A," a voice shouted over the intercom. "The fossil is destabilizing." Adrian turned toward the chamber instinctively, feeling a pull that was impossible to resist. "I have to go," he said. "No." Lila grabbed his arm. "You don't know what it'll do to you." He met her gaze, his expression resolute. "I think I do." He entered the containment chamber just as the field flickered and collapsed entirely. The fossil glowed brighter than ever, cracks spreading like veins of molten light across its surface. The air itself seemed to hum with energy, vibrating at a frequency that resonated deep within Adrian's chest. He stepped closer, each movement guided by something beyond conscious thought. "You're calling me," he murmured. "Why?" The answer came not in words, but in feeling, recognition, compatibility, purpose. The fossil pulsed once, then shattered. Fragments of ancient bone dissolved into particles of light, swirling around Adrian in a controlled storm. He didn't run. He didn't even flinch. Instead, he stood still as the energy enveloped him, merging with his body in a way that felt both alien and strangely natural. His vision flared white, and for a moment, he felt as though he were no longer human, no longer bound by flesh or limitation. He was something else, something greater. Outside the chamber, Lila watched in horror and awe as the monitors spiked beyond measurable limits. "Adrian!" she shouted, but her voice couldn't reach him. The energy storm intensified, then collapsed inward, vanishing as suddenly as it had appeared. Silence. When it cleared, Adrian stood alone in the chamber. At first glance, he looked unchanged. But as he lifted his head, Lila saw it. The faint glow beneath his skin, like embers burning just below the surface. His eyes, once a calm brown, now shimmered with a subtle golden hue. He took a slow breath, and for a brief moment, the air around him seemed to ripple with heat. "What happened?" Lila whispered. Adrian looked at his hands, flexing his fingers as if rediscovering them. It wasn't just DNA, he said quietly. It was a transfer. Knowledge, memory, something more. He paused, searching for the right word. A legacy. The implications hit them both at once. You're connected to it now, Lila said. To them. Adrian nodded slowly. Yes. He looked up, his gaze distant, as if focusing on something far beyond the walls of the facility. And they're not gone. A deep, distant rumble echoed across the desert, low, powerful, unmistakable. Not an earthquake, not machinery, something alive. Adrian's expression hardened, a mix of realization and inevitability settling over him. That was a signal, he said. The activation. It didn't just affect me. Lila's voice trembled. What are you saying? Adrian turned toward the horizon, where the sky seemed to shimmer faintly with heat. I just woke something up. Dragon. The first confirmed sighting came less than 12 hours after the activation. A surveillance satellite orbiting high above the Pacific registered a massive thermal anomaly rising from the ocean floor, too large, too structured to be volcanic. Within minutes, the feed cut to static, replaced by a brief flash of something immense breaking the surface before vanishing into the clouds. Governments scrambled, issuing denials while quietly mobilizing military assets. But inside the research facility, Adrian didn't need reports to know what had happened. He felt it, a distant pulse, like a heartbeat echoing across the planet, resonating through his mind with increasing clarity. Each pulse carried fragments of awareness, locations, sensations, instincts, like a network coming online piece by piece. He stood at the observation deck, staring out over the desert as the sun dipped below the horizon, his golden-tinged eyes unfocused. They're waking up, he said quietly. Lila stood beside him, arms wrapped tightly around herself. How many? She asked. Adrian hesitated, the question forcing him to focus on the flood of impressions coursing through him. I don't know, dozens, maybe more. Some are deep underground, others beneath ice oceans. They were hidden everywhere. His voice carried a mix of awe and unease. They weren't just buried. They were placed. Lila turned to him sharply. Placed? By who? Adrian didn't answer immediately, because the truth forming in his mind wasn't something he was ready to say out loud. Not yet. The military wasted no time. Within hours of the satellite anomaly, jets were deployed, reconnaissance drones launched, and containment strategies drafted under the assumption that whatever had emerged was a threat. Adrian was brought into a secured briefing room, flanked by armed guards, as high-ranking officials projected live feeds onto a wall-sized display. Dr. Cole, one general began, his tone controlled but urgent. We need to know what we're dealing with. Is this connected to your experiment? Adrian glanced at the footage. Grainy images of a colossal shape moving through storm clouds, lightning illuminating scales that shimmered like molten metal. He exhaled slowly. Yes, he said, but it's not an experiment anymore. The room fell silent. These aren't animals, Adrian continued. They're an ancient species, intelligent, networked. What we activated wasn't just DNA, it was a signal, a wake-up call. One of the officials leaned forward. Are they hostile? Adrian met his gaze, unflinching. That depends on how we act next. Back in the lab, the connection intensified. Adrian no longer needed to concentrate to feel it. The presence of the dragons was constant now, a low hum beneath his thoughts. At times, it overwhelmed him, flooding his mind with sensations that weren't his own. The rush of wind beneath massive wings, the pressure of deep ocean currents, the searing heat of internal fire building within a creature far larger than anything that should exist. He staggered once, gripping the edge of a console as a particularly strong surge hit him. Lila rushed to his side. Adrian, you're not okay. This is too much. He shook his head, breathing heavily. No, I'm adapting. They're not trying to hurt me. They're sinking. Sinking for what? She asked. He looked at her, and for a moment, his expression wasn't entirely human. For contact. The answer came sooner than expected. That night, The desert sky split with a thunderous roar. Not from storm or aircraft, but from something alive. Personnel rushed outside, weapons drawn, as a massive silhouette descended from the darkness above. Floodlights snapped on, illuminating a creature that defied every law of nature. Wings spanning dozens of meters, scales reflecting light like living armor, and eyes that burned with an intelligence far too focused to be instinct alone. The dragon landed with controlled force, sending dust and sand spiraling outward in a shockwave. Soldiers aimed their weapons, fingers trembling on triggers. "Don't," Adrian said, stepping forward. "Dr. Cole, get back," a soldier shouted. But Adrian didn't stop. The pull was undeniable now, stronger than ever. Each step felt guided, as if the ground itself urged him forward. The dragon lowered its massive head, eyes locking onto his. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Then the connection snapped into place. Not sight, not sound. Understanding. Images flooded Adrian's mind, clearer than ever before. He saw the dragons as they once were. A civilization older than human history, their kind spread across the planet, not as rulers but as guardians. They had shaped ecosystems, stabilized climates, and maintained a balance that early humanity had never known existed. But something had changed. Humans had grown, advanced, expanded, and with that growth came conflict. The dragons, recognizing the inevitability of human dominance, had made a choice: to withdraw, to become myth, to encode themselves into dormancy, leaving behind fragments, fossils, seeds, waiting for a time when coexistence might be possible again. And now, that time had come. Adrian staggered slightly as the vision ended, but he didn't break eye contact. "You're not here to destroy us," he said softly. "You're here to see if we've changed." The dragon's chest expanded as it exhaled a slow stream of heated air. Not flame, but a controlled breath that rippled the sand between them. Around them, soldiers remained frozen, unsure whether to fire or flee. Lila watched from a distance, heart pounding, realizing that the fate of this moment rested entirely on Adrian. "They're afraid," Adrian said, glancing back briefly at the soldiers before returning his gaze to the dragon. "But they don't understand you. Not yet." The dragon tilted its head slightly, studying him. Then, slowly, it extended one massive claw, not in attack, but in something resembling an offering. Adrian hesitated for only a second before stepping closer and placing his hand against the scaled surface. The moment their skin made contact, the connection deepened exponentially. Words formed in his mind, not spoken but undeniable. "Bridge." Adrian's breath caught. "You want me to be the bridge," he whispered. Another pulse of understanding followed. Agreement, expectation, responsibility. Behind him, the general shouted orders, panic breaking through discipline. "Stand down or we fire." Adrian didn't turn around. "If you do that," he said calmly, "you won't just start a fight. You'll start a war we can't win." Silence followed, heavy, tense. The dragon withdrew its claw slowly, wings shifting as it prepared to take flight again. But before it did, it looked at Adrian one last time. A gaze filled not with hostility, but with something far more complex. Judgment, hope, uncertainty. Then it launched into the sky, disappearing into the darkness with a thunderous beat of wings. The soldiers lowered their weapons slowly, the reality of what they had just witnessed sinking in. Lila approached Adrian cautiously. "What did it say to you?" He didn't answer immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the sky, the golden glow within them faint but unmistakable. Finally, he spoke. "They're giving us a chance." He turned to face the facility, his expression no longer uncertain, but resolved. "And if we fail," he added quietly, "they won't go back to sleep this time." Dragon. The world did not react with unity. It never had, and this moment proved no different. Within hours of the first confirmed dragon encounter, global networks flooded with conflicting narratives, some calling the creatures divine, others labeling them existential threats. Governments mobilized, alliances strained, and weapon systems, some never meant to be used, were quietly brought online. In war rooms across continents, one question echoed louder than all others. Do we strike first? Adrian stood at the center of it all, no longer just a scientist, but the only living bridge between humanity and the awakened dragons. The connection within him had stabilized, no longer overwhelming but ever-present, like a second heartbeat guiding his thoughts. He could feel them now more clearly than ever, dozens of minds, vast and ancient, watching, waiting, not advancing, not retreating, judging. They're holding back, Adrian explained during an emergency global summit. His voice broadcast to leaders who stared at him with equal parts skepticism and desperation. They could have attacked already. They haven't. That means this is a test. A general from one of the more aggressive nations leaned forward. Or it means they're preparing. We don't gamble the survival of our species on hope, Doctor. Adrian met his gaze without flinching. And we don't ensure our survival by firing on something we don't understand. You won't win that fight. The room fell into uneasy silence. Because deep down, every strategist, every analyst, had reached the same conclusion. If the dragons were as powerful as initial encounters suggested, a direct conflict wouldn't just be costly. It could be catastrophic. But fear is louder than reason. The first strike came from a remote defense installation, unauthorized, reactionary, and irreversible. A hypersonic missile, armed with experimental payloads, was launched toward a dragon sighted above a polar region. Adrian felt it before the news broke. A sudden spike of pain and rage tearing through the network, so intense it dropped him to his knees. No, he whispered, clutching his chest as if the impact had struck him directly. Lila rushed to his side. What happened? He looked up at her, eyes burning with a mix of fury and dread. They attacked first. Halfway across the world, the missile struck its target. For a brief moment, the sky lit up with blinding energy, and then nothing. No falling body. No sign of damage. The smoke cleared to reveal the dragon still airborne, its form barely affected, its eyes now blazing with something far more dangerous than curiosity. It let out a roar that shattered ice sheets for miles, a sound so deep and powerful that it registered on seismic monitors across the globe. That roar was not just sound. It was a signal. Adrian felt the shift instantly. The network changed, no longer passive, no longer observing. It awakened fully, each dragon responding to the call. The air itself seemed to grow heavier, charged with an energy that made every instinct scream in warning. It's starting, Adrian said, his voice low. They're done waiting. Panic spread faster than any coordinated response. Military forces scrambled, launching more attacks in desperation. Each one met with overwhelming resistance. Dragons moved with precision and intelligence, disabling weapon systems, intercepting projectiles, and demonstrating control rather than chaos. But the message was clear. They would not be threatened into submission. Cities braced for impact, skies filled with the silhouettes of creatures once thought mythical, and humanity stood on the edge of a war it could neither understand nor survive. Adrian knew there was only one chance left. I need to reach them, he told Lila, already moving toward the transport bay. You already have, she argued. They're listening to you. Not like this, he replied. Not as a human talking to them. I need to meet them as something they recognize, something they trust. Her expression shifted as realization dawned. Adrian, if you go deeper into that connection, I might not come back the same, he finished for her. I know. There was no time for more words. Within minutes, Adrian stood alone in the open desert, the same place where it had all begun. The sky above churned with distant movement, dragons crossing continents, responding to the call. He closed his eyes, steadying his breath, and let the connection take hold fully. He didn't resist this time. He didn't hold back. He opened himself to it. The world faded. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound, no form, just awareness. Then, slowly, the presence of the dragons surrounded him. Vast, ancient, powerful beyond comprehension. He was no longer standing in the desert. He was within the network, within their shared consciousness, where distance and time held no meaning. And they were watching him. "You gave us a chance," Adrian said, his voice echoing not in air, but in thought. "And we failed." A wave of emotion responded, anger, yes, but also disappointment. Not hatred. Not yet. "They're afraid," Adrian continued. "You knew they would be. You've seen what fear does to us." Another pulse, acknowledgement. "But fear isn't all we are," he pressed. "You've seen that too. You saw it in me. In Lila. In every moment we chose not to destroy what we didn't understand." The presence shifted, focusing more tightly around him. Testing. Weighing. "If you judge us by our worst moment," Adrian said, "then we lose before we've had a chance to prove we can be better. And you lose something too." A pause. Then a question, not in words, but in pure meaning. "What do we lose?" Adrian didn't hesitate. "Us." The answer resonated through the network, rippling outward. Images followed, memories not just his own, but shared. Elias caring for a forgotten creature, a human choosing compassion over fear, countless small moments where understanding bridged the gap between species. Proof that coexistence wasn't impossible. It had already begun. "You went dormant because you believed we might grow into something worth sharing this world with," Adrian said. "Give us that chance. Not because we deserve it yet, but because we can." Silence fell, not empty, but contemplative. Then, slowly, the presence began to change. The anger receded, not gone, but tempered. The network stabilized, the surge of imminent conflict easing just enough to matter. Back in the physical world, the skies shifted. Dragons that had been advancing slowed, hovering instead of striking. Military systems, locked onto targets, hesitated as the creatures held position rather than retaliate. The world stood frozen in a fragile, impossible moment of stillness. Adrian's consciousness snapped back into his body, and he collapsed to one knee, gasping for air. Lila ran to him, catching him before he fell completely. "Did it work?" she asked, her voice trembling. He looked up at the sky, where a massive dragon circled silently above, no longer aggressive, just watching. "They're waiting," he said softly. "For what?" Adrian's expression hardened, the weight of what came next settling fully onto his shoulders. "For us to decide who we are." High above, the dragon let out a low, resonant call. Not a roar of war, but something deeper. A signal carried across the world, echoed by others in distant skies. Not a declaration of dominance, but a warning and a promise. Humanity had been given one final chance. And this time, there would be no second awakening. "Dragon,"